Hi, my name is Frank Schaeffer, and I have a kind of morbid fascination with the decline of the Republican Party into an insurrectionist group of people who can't even get themselves a leader in the House of Representatives because of their terminal dysfunction. My interest in this comes from the fact that, given my background as a right-wing evangelical activist in the 1970s and 80s, all the way up into the early 90s, when I completely left the movement, I knew these kind of people well. In fact, I knew some of the actual people like Mitch McConnell and others who I met along the way. Now, I bailed and got out about 30 years ago and have been a critic of both the Republican Party, but also the evangelical movement within it. And this sounds a little pompous, forgive me, but when it comes to the evangelical nexus between the evangelical right and the Republicans, I'm one of the people who knows what he's talking about on this subject. I was there and have watched the progress or the decline of this movement the whole way. And I want to point something out, and that is that the dysfunction you see in the race for who is going to be the Speaker of the House now that the Republicans have a slim majority is really an example of a larger dysfunction. And that is that this country, the United States of America, has yet to reckon with the baleful negative influence of the evangelical vote and what it has done to American politics. You see, the evangelical base is the Republican base. If you expand that to include Hispanic evangelicals, about a third of Hispanic voters identify themselves as evangelicals, or charismatics, or conservative Roman Catholics. You have a group of people that actually control the party, and they control who won, who lost. They also are the core of the people who don't accept the election results when Biden became president. About 70% say that they still don't accept that result, and they think that Donald Trump is still president, even as he becomes more and more irrelevant. And without really looking honestly at that group, you can't explain anything. When I read the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, I listen to MSNBC and all the rest, I lament the fact that there are so few commentators who will stand up and say, look, America does not have a political problem. We have a religious problem. We have a group of people who have taken over a political party and are really plunging America into what amounts to a new war of religion between the insiders in the evangelical/Roman Catholic group and everyone else. Someone who's a great example of that is Amy Coney Barrett in the Supreme Court, using her position as a justice on the bench there to propagate a point of view which really is about religion, whether it is striking down Roe v. Wade or all the other multitude of issues they have addressed in giving religious freedom greater freedom than other freedoms in, for instance, allowing people to not service gay folks who want to get married when it comes to wedding cakes or photographs or wedding planning or whatever it may be. This is all part of the same agenda. So when you see a Republican Party that has been taken over by the radical right, what you were seeing is the equivalent of back in the day in the 70s and 80s when I was cutting my teeth in the Republican Party. At that time, the radicals were on the left. You had the Weather Underground, the SDS, the Black Panthers, many other people. What we see today is the equivalent to if the Republicans and Democrats traded places, and it was the Democrats who back in the 70s had elected people from the Weather Underground, the SDS, Black Panthers, etc., violent insurrectionists that were bombing banks and doing all sorts of things, killing people, all the rest of it. If they had wound up in Congress, but they didn't, because the Democrats pushed back their radical fringe and contained it and never allowed them into the mainstream of politics. Well, the Republicans have. So in the mainstream of Republican politics now, we have a group of people who are the Republican/evangelical equivalent to the SDS, the Weather Underground, and the other people who were bombing and doing all sorts of things in the 60s and the 70s and into the early 80s, trying to move the country in a revolutionary left-wing direction. And now we have a revolutionary right-wing direction. The difference being the dysfunction at the heart of the evangelical movement has now so infected the Republican Party that itself it is unable to function. And that is a reflection of the fact that evangelical Christianity is itself, and forgive me, I'm going to be blunt, a form of mental illness. when it gets into its fundamentalist iteration. If you really believe that this world is directed by sort of a prophetic vision of the return of Christ, that Israel will be destroyed, that all the Jews except a few chosen have to die, that the whole purpose of American history is the fulfillment of prophecy, that Donald Trump was ordained by God, that he is still president somehow in a mystical way. If you buy all that, that is rooted in a belief of mythology in so many other areas, whether it's denying evolution or climate science or anything else. This is all part of one package here. Evangelical madness, mental illness, dysfunction takes over the Republican Party. The Republican Party at its fringe begins to reflect that, and then the fringe becomes the mainstream. And yet our mainstream media and academic critics and others don't dare stand up and speak the truth. And that is, we don't have a political problem. We have a religious problem, very similar to what's going on in Iran, very similar to what happened to Saudi Arabia, very similar to the Orthodox radical right-wing Jews now taking over Israel in a coalition government and pushing their country to the far right. It is a phenomenon across the planet, the rise of fundamentalism. But here in America, it has rendered the Republican Party totally dysfunctional, negative, revolutionary, bomb-throwing, nihilistic. And that's what we're stuck with. And that's why the dysfunction in Congress is taking place. It is a religious war being conducted against the rest of us. That's the deal. That's the problem. My name is Frank Schaeffer.